How long will your emergency food last? If disaster struck today, how long would your stockpile last? Careful, it's a trick question. I'm not asking how long you will be able to live off your stockpile. I'm asking about the actual shelf life of the foods in your basement or pantry. Though you may have beans and cereal to eat, in theory can last 10 years or more, the way you store them can substantially decrease or increase that amount. In other words, you may have quite a bit of food in your pantry right now that has less than a year until it expires, and that's a tough position to be in if a serious, earth-shaking disaster struck today. The scoop on emergency food storage, extending the shelf life of several foods. Food storage done right, so you can double, triple, or even quadruple the shelf life of your foods. Let's talk about that for a moment. It all starts with the 5 food storage enemies: oxygen, moisture, temperature, light, and pests. The 6th one is time, but there's nothing we can do about that except rotating our stash. Now, if you're looking to get 10, 20, or even 30 years of shelf life off your foods, you need to tackle all of these enemies, no exception. Extending the shelf life of grains, beans, and rice. These are some of the foods with a long shelf life preppers like to stockpile that are also cheap. However, not all varieties are worthy to be in your stockpile. For example, Cheerios and other breakfast cereals you typically buy at the supermarket have a shelf life of 6 to 8 months. Processed cereals have many refined and hydrogenated oils in them. Oils goes rancid, so even if you were to use the preservation techniques we're going to talk about in a minute, it still wouldn't be worth it. Thus, step 1 in storing your food for a really long time is to pick the right food. When we're talking about real long-term emergency food storage, opt for storing white rice, not brown, dried beans, and whole wheat berries, not breakfast cereals. Rice, beans, and wheat berries should be the staples of your survival stockpile. Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers for storing emergency food. The best way to store your emergency food is in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. This is a no-fail combination used by most preppers, provided your food is dry before you store it. Otherwise, you can wake up with condensation after you seal the package, which is not a good thing. The process is simple. You fill the bag nearly all the way to the top, seal it using an iron or a head straightener, but not before you add a pack of the oxygen absorber. Depending on the size of the bag, oxygen absorbers are small packs of iron powder and create a nitrogen environment by removing any oxygen present through chemical reactions. So, even if the bag will look like it's got air inside, you don't need to panic, because that's just nitrogen. It's worth mentioning that neither the nitrogen nor the iron powder can affect your food, provided you keep the O2 absorbers inside the original packaging. As you can see, you don't need to vacuum seal the bags. The absorbers will do the trick to prevent growth of aerobic pathogens, such as mold, as well as preventing oxidation. These are 2 ways oxygen can spoil your food. Besides, your cereals will crumble under the pressure of the bag. Put Mylar bags inside airtight, BPA-free 5-gallon buckets. Next, you should put the Mylar bags inside airtight, BPA-free 5-gallon buckets. This may seem unnecessary, but it's actually a good idea. First off, the bucket will shield the bags from the light, another declared food storage enemy, thus improving shelf life. Second, it protects the bag from accidental puncturing. We talked about aerobic bacteria, but anaerobes need very little or no oxygen to develop. The most important one is called Clostridium botulinum and is responsible for a disease called botulism, not something you want to suffer from post-collapse. This doesn't really occur when storing grains, beans and rice, as long as they're not moist. It's something that mostly shows up in canned food, which we'll tackle in a moment. The last thing you need to do after you've taken care of oxygen, light, and humidity is ensure the proper temperature. Anywhere between 50 Fahrenheit and 70 Fahrenheit will work, preferably close to 50. If you do everything right, How long can food last in storage? What shelf life can you expect if you do everything right? This is pretty amazing. White rice can last at least 7 to 8 years, with some sources going as high as 25. Hard grains such as wheat and corn can store for at least 10 years. Soft grains can last about 8 years because the outer shell is not as strong as that of hard grains. Emergency food storage for pasta. Storing pasta for the long term is just as easy as storing beans or grain. If you read the label, they tell you it lasts for 1 to 2 years. But if you store it in mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, that shelf life can increase up to 10 times. That's 20 plus years in shelf life. Place it in plastic buckets to protect it from light, from crumbling inside, and from accidental puncturing of the bag. Speaking of punctures, you may want to consider storing things like spaghetti in 5mm bags instead of the more common 3.5mm to avoid any sharp noodles accidentally poking holes in a mylar. Some people like to freeze pasta before storage to prevent larva eggs from hatching. So, to kill these eggs, noodles shouldn't stay frozen for approximately 5 days. But this method is not needed as long as you use oxygen absorbers. Ultimately, freezing the noodles won't hurt them, but it won't really help either. If you decide to do it, you need to allow the frozen noodles to reach room temperature before you seal these noodles in mylars. Otherwise, condensation will form and allow the growth of mold. Canned food can last several years past its expiration date. There are a lot of myths about canned foods, and I want to burst the ones that have to do with shelf life. The one related to the expiration date. Food experts on shelf life have looked closely at unopened cans of food from several decades back, sometimes recovered from shipwrecks, and the data they found was a real eye-opener. Canned food can last several years past its expiration date, as long as the can has been properly stored and it looks good on the outside. It's not leaking and the lid is not swollen or punctured. It's probably safe to eat. You still have to check for suspicious smells, but there have been reports of canned food that was safe to eat even after 30 or 40 years. Nevertheless, plenty of people have reported being absolutely fine after eating canned food past the expiration date. Of course, you need to give your cans the same conditions you do to your beans and rice. Keep them in a cool, dry, dark place away from moisture. Now, there are two types of canned food when it comes to how long they last: high acidic and low acidic. The USDA guidelines tell us that high acid food, canned fruit or pickles, can last up to 18 months, while low acid food, canned meat, beans, corn, potatoes, etc., up to 5 years. The acid in these cans contributes to the deterioration of color, texture, and nutrients over time, of course. As mentioned earlier, if the can looks, smells, and tastes okay, you can ignore the expiration and the best buy dates. In a post-collapse, you might not have a choice anyway. Extending the shelf life of peanut butter. Peanut butter is jam-packed with calories and can last a long time if properly stored. But there's a catch. It's full of oils and, as previously said, oils go rancid over time. It depends which type of PB you're storing, because natural peanut butter only lasts a few months, while smooth and crunchy can last up to a year. To improve its shelf life, you need to keep peanut butter tightly sealed and in a cool, dry, dark place. You should also store it in a glass rather than a plastic jar to increase longevity even more. The alternative to PB is powdered peanut butter, which should store for at least 5 years, closer to 10 actually, and it's good for another year after you open it. That's considerably longer than traditional peanut butter. Food items with an indefinite shelf life. You've probably heard that honey has an indefinite shelf life. The only thing that can go wrong with it is crystallization, meaning the sugar molecules align themselves in a certain way. This is not a sign it went bad, but still, there's an easy fix. Place the open jar in a pot full of hot water and stir it until the crystals dissolve. In order to slow down the crystallization process, simply store the honey at room temperature. Since most of your foods need to be in cool places, you can keep honey in your kitchen or pantry, where you probably have more space. The other items with an indefinite shelf life are salt, sugar, and molasses. But the one thing you should do is keep them away from moisture. It's common for basements to develop mold due to poor ventilation. So the two options you have are to either install a fan, if your basement has windows, a dehumidifier, which unfortunately will incur electricity costs, or use some of the other recommended options, depending on how bad things are. The shelf life of seeds. No long-term survival plan is complete without the seeds that will allow you to start a garden once the dust settles after a collapse. In a worst-case scenario, especially those who live in heavily populated areas, that may mean a long and difficult evacuation from a disaster-struck region. The good news about seeds is that they don't take up a lot of space and you can transport them with relative ease when the time is right. Plant that garden finally. The most important thing to seed storage is to keep these seeds dry. Moisture is the biggest enemy, but fortunately, one you can easily defeat. Keeping your seeds in a cool, dry place should work. And don't forget to add desiccants to the container and seal them afterwards. Another thing you need to do is dry them before storage. If you don't want to use desiccants, you have other options, such as putting them in paper envelopes. Other options include storing them inside the fridge or the freezer, but if you're left without power in the next disaster, you're still going to use one of the aforementioned solutions. The shelf life of various seeds varies. Some people say they can last up to 100 years. They actually found seeds inside the belly of a frozen mammoth, meaning they lasted thousands of years. It's hard to say, but if you do it right, you can expect to get at least 5 years of storage life and a 70% germination rate. The ones that have the longest shelf life are bean, 2 to 3 years. Radish, muskmelon, cress, collards and cucumber, 5 years. Tomato, squash, turnips, eggplant, sorrel, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts and watermelon, 4 years each. But again, the life of a seed can increase if you do a good job storing them. Emergency food storage for your pet. How to store dry and canned pet food. There are essentially 2 types of pet food you can stockpile, and they're the same ones you feed your pets every day: dry and canned. Surprisingly, canned food lasts a lot longer than dry, because dry food has a lot of fat in it, which causes it to go rancid quickly. Dry food usually lasts a year, while canned food for 2+ years. If you're thinking of using oxygen absorbers with dry pet food, it might not work. You might wake up with mold rings around the absorbers, which will in turn spoil the entire bag, as several preppers have cautioned. The good news about storing pet food, though, is that there's no difference between survival food and what they regularly eat for your pet. The other good news is that pets can eat human survival food, for lack of a better term. For example, dogs can eat white rice, which we already know can last a lot longer if properly stored, being one of the most popular survival foods. As long as you store your pet food in a cool, dry, dark place, such as a ventilated basement, you'll surely get a lot more than the 1 or 2 years it's stated to last. How temperature fluctuations affect emergency food. Before we wrap this up, I need to address an overlooked aspect: fluctuations in temperature. We said earlier that some foods need to be stored at temperatures between 50 Fahrenheit and 70 Fahrenheit, but that's only half of the story. The other half is that you need to keep temperature variations to a minimum, because they too can negatively affect the shelf life. Even if you keep it within the interval at all times, fluctuations between 50 Fahrenheit and 70 Fahrenheit should be avoided. Why store up a...
Hey everyone, today I'm going to kick off my apartment prepping series, starting with a kit that I think you're going to find very useful. Don't go anywhere, you're watching Living Survival. Alright guys, so I'm going to be doing a series of videos starting today of apartment preps. Now this doesn't mean in any way that you couldn't do this at your home, condo, you know, wherever you live. You can take advice from this video. I just happen to live in an apartment, so these are the preps that I'm currently doing, and I wanted to share those with you. I've already had to rely on a kit just like this a couple years back when we had an incredible ice storm where it knocked out power for over a week. That means all the food in the refrigerator went bad. We had to rely on canned foods and things like that, boil our water to make things like coffee. We really couldn't go anywhere because the snow was very deep. Gas stations were closed, a lot of stores were closed, so it was great to be able to rely on a pack like this, and I think the most handy item was our headlamps. Now I'm not saying that you shouldn't also have a bug out bag. You should have a bug out bag, you should have a get home bag in your car, you should have a car kit. I'm going to go over stuff like that in future videos in my Prepared to Survive series. We'll go over updates of all of that. This is really just meant to be a family survival kit that you keep at home. It's not going to have things like sleep systems, it's not going to have pots and pans, it's not going to have food and water, which I'm going to go over in future videos of my apartment prepping series. It's simply meant to be common household items all in one spot that you know are there. You're not going to misplace, you're not going to use things from this kit like you might do with your camping or hiking equipment. Again, I chose a bright color so that everybody in the family knows what it is and right where it is. It's also a pack so that if you did have to take this on the go and it was all you had, you couldn't get access to your bug out bag, for example, it is portable, being a backpack. In the main compartment here, we can go over the items in there first. I have gloves. Gloves are something that I often look for in my toolbox. They're not there. Maybe I used them in the car, for example. A tornado or something might strike where part of your home is damaged and you have to move things out of the way, or you have to, rebuild certain things. Gloves are certainly very handy for that. Broken glass, nails, things like that. I've got a couple of N95 masks here. Again, if a tornado were to strike or you have maybe a sandstorm in the desert or something like that and your windows are busted out, these masks can come in very handy. You might have a flu epidemic or something like that, have to, open your doors and windows. You might want to wear something like this. So I thought it was a handy item to have in this kit, something that you don't have to search all over the house for. I have a couple ways to start fire. Now I don't need a ferro rod or anything like that. I simply just need a way to maybe boil up some food to purify it, or cook on the cook stove, which I've also included in here. Chances are in a city-wide shutdown or a natural disaster, for example, your gas stove is no longer going to work. Of course, if you have no electricity, your electric range isn't going to work anymore. So you're going to have to rely on a stove to heat things up, boil water, and things like that. So I have some strike anywhere matches, which will strike on anything, and then I just have one of these extendable Scripto lighters. Folds up, nice and compact, orange in color so that you can easily see it. I've got some duct tape. Duct tape is very handy. I'm going to go over how to create a microclimate as one of the videos in this series. Duct tape is going to come in very handy for that. And again, duct tape is one of those items that you think you have, then you go to the drawer to get it, and it's gone. So it's a great item, very inexpensive item to have in a kit like this. Speaking of cooking, I'm not going to have pots or pans or anything like that in this kit because, of course, you are going to have those in the household, and chances of those getting destroyed or lost is pretty slim to none. But I thought it would be a good idea to have a little gas camping stove. Although you're not recommended to use these indoors, I have used these indoors before to heat things up like coffee and to make dehydrated meals and things like that. So I thought it would be a good idea to have this in this kit. This is a fairly inexpensive one. I think this was $15 on sale. And again, it's something that you can use with these gas canisters, and you can quickly heat water, to make the water potable again. Maybe you have a bad storm and your water gets shut off, for example. Hopefully you filled up all the bathtubs and sinks and things like that. Again, you want to prepare for 2 to 4 weeks in an emergency like that. So a little stove like this not only can keep you warm, but it can cook your food, and it's a good item to have in this kit because, again, your electric stove or your gas range may not be working. Speaking of water, I didn't include any water filters or anything like that. Again, in a disaster, you're going to want to plan for 2 to 4 weeks. So if you think that your water might get shut off, maybe there's a water main break or other thing that can happen in an earthquake, for example, you're going to want to fill your bathtubs, pretty much any container that you have, 5-gallon buckets. buckets. And what these do is these will treat that water in your bathtub or in your 5-gallon buckets, for example. They're made for larger amounts of water. Now you should also prepare, as I said, for 2 to 4 weeks without it. So multiply the people in your family. You want 1 gallon minimum, and don't forget to include the dog. So for me, that's about 3 gallons of water a day times 30 days, a month, and I have enough packets in here to treat that much water. If the electricity's out, lighting's going to become a problem at night, so glow sticks are a great item to have, especially if you have kids. These will definitely ease their anxiety a little bit. We'll go more into lighting once we get into another compartment of the pack. This is a thermal blanket. Many uses for this. Again, when speaking of the microclimate that you can create in your house, let's say the power's out for a week and it's sub-zero temperatures outside, you're going to want to make yourself a nice little microclimate inside. You can even set up a tent inside, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a future video. So things like this inexpensive thermal blanket are a great item to have. It's also orange on the other side. We know from Katrina that they were trying to signal for weeks. A nice bright orange tarp, something you could throw on the outside of your apartment or on the roof of your house, will come in very handy. Then finally, in the main compartment, just some candles. Candles are very inexpensive, something you should stock up on. You can use candles instead of battery power to give yourself some light at night. So then in the front of the pack, I have some electronics in here. Again, you want to look for stuff that's on sale. I got 2 of these for $10. They're little 80 lumen Energizer headlamps, and 2 for $10, $5 a piece, and they include 3 Energizer batteries, 3 Energizer AAA batteries a piece. I thought that was a fantastic deal. Again, do I want to use my expensive Petzl and put it in this kit where I'm probably going to take it out and use it and never put it back? No, I want to have dedicated equipment just for this kit, and I didn't want to pay a whole lot of money because hopefully I'm never going to have to use it. Then I've got a crank radio. This is probably the most expensive part of this kit, but I thought it was very useful to have. Again, an item that you might think you have in a drawer or something like that. You go to use it and it's not there. It's got solar charging on the top, so not only can it do AM, FM radio, you can listen to radio stations in and around town to hear about emergencies and things like that. It's also got weather radio, which is handy. It's got a flashlight on the side, which obviously is very handy. And then it also has a way to charge your cell phone. Now, chances are after a month your cell phone isn't going to work. Again, you could rely on other pieces of kit you might have in your home, like a solar panel or battery backups and things like that. Again, this kit is bare bones. This kit is the stuff that you can rely on in an emergency. So it does have the capability to give yourself a little bit of a charge. It also runs on an 18650 battery, which I thought was really cool. So in a pinch, you could use this to get a little bit of charge in your 18650s just by cranking it up. So again, this was about $39, but I feel it's very important to have in this kit and know right where it is. I've got some extra batteries here. Never know what you might need extra batteries for. I try to use AAAs for everything, so that's a pack of AAAs. Then finally, I just have a medical kit. Again, you might think that you have Band-Aids and gauze and tape and things in your, in your medical kit, in your drawer, stuffed away somewhere. A lot of us go through that stuff and don't replace it. So it's good to have a dedicated first aid kit that is stocked, that you're not going to have to steal items from. And I chose to put that in this kit. So again, these items are just items that I can throw in this kit, forget about it. I don't have to pick and choose through here and hope that I put things back. I can leave everything in here all the time. Inexpensive, all this stuff was less than $100, and I feel that this is the most important stuff. Again, there's no sleep system in here. You can create a microclimate with sleeping bags and pillows and couch cushions and things like that. We'll go over that in a future video, as I said. Water and food don't need to be in this kit because hopefully you're stocked up on that, and those are going to be subjects for future videos as well. So if there's anything that you think might go in a kit like this, a bug-in kit, items that are commonly found around your house but may not be there when you need them, let me know in the comment section below. I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts, and I'll also reply to your comment telling you, yeah, I might have thought of that, or I did think of that, but I didn't choose to put it in this kit for this particular reason. So hopefully we can have a good conversation on that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video today, taking a look at my bug-in bag.
Why store up emergency food? So you can survive during a famine. In the modern age, with so many grocery stores and restaurants bustling with activity and low prices, sometimes high, on many common food items, It's hard to imagine what life would be like if suddenly it all came to an end. Unfortunately, if someone were to pull the plug on interstate shipping and nationwide commercial food processing and commercial agriculture, literally overnight stores across several regions would slam shut their doors, and before you knew it, the greatest disaster in America's history would unfold right before our eyes. Famine, food shortages, long lines stretching possibly miles for a government handout, until the government closes its doors as well. Long lines seeking food at churches, that is until churches run out of food. And soup kitchens. Soup kitchens, once popular with the homeless, but now attracting crowds of hungry and scared citizens and their families looking for food and also looking for a solution. But there won't be one. What about organizations like the Red Cross and Salvation Army? In some communities, in the first few hours and days, they may also be a source of food, but expect incredibly long lines. When or if food finally gets into your hands, unfortunately, it may not be something you really find that palatable. Food storage happens now, not later. It's a sad, unfortunate fact that there will be a day where tens of millions of people realize that so many signs about a coming catastrophe were all around them. But they were just too glued to their daily routines and complacency and stubbornness about life to notice. And it's not just the banksters at the top of the food chain, preying on the consumers, or the super elites at the head of our corporations. No, it's the rest of us also. The people that make up modern day nations caught up in what the Bible describes as carnal, worldly lives, with a complete disregard for God and his warnings about that coming wrath on the world to deal with its many evils and atrocities.